Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Popular Decks. I'm your host Michael and I'm here today with this doozy of a deck. It is quite the monstrosity that I brewed up just the other day, but it has been super fun, so we'll get to this crazy list in a second. Just a reminder to you guys, always remember to subscribe down below if you want to get alerted anytime I put out new videos, or follow me on Twitter. I will always tweet out anytime I put out any new videos and anytime I go live on Twitch. So follow me there and you can always find out when I'm putting out new content. So I decided to build this deck because I was sick of always playing teachings and people would target my win conditions. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing to do against teachings, but it is pretty annoying when I have to waste a precious counterspell to protect my Evankar's Justice from a duress, or to protect my Curse of the Bloody Tome, or to protect my Pristine Talisman. It kind of made me annoyed that basically all kinds of hate interactions were decent against us, and I didn't like that at all. So I decided to instead make a deck that's 100 cards. So you can see that I have the deck list is pretty small, or the picture of these cards is pretty small, and we still can't get all the lands in the frame, but I'll do my best to kind of show you guys, and then I'll make it bigger when we get to different things. So what I did was I basically put in a bunch of lands that I thought would be good in this deck, in addition to the lands that are normally in it. So what I added was I filled out the full 4 Ash Barrens, I put in 4 Evolving Wilds, and I added 4 Submerged Boneyards, and then I tossed in 2 Cycling Lands, and I believe 1 of each basic, maybe 2, I don't quite remember how I did it, but I ended up with, this is 25 more lands, I think, than my normal one. So, percentage-wise, in order to get the same percentage of lands and spells as what I would normally want, that meant I had to do 100. So, I did the math, and that's what I got. So, the reason I wanted to put in these fetch lands is I was always kind of upset that my teaching stacks never had room for Brainstorm. So, let's get this a little bigger now that we're done with the lands. So, I was able to put in 4 Brainstorms in here, and then I got to put in some interesting utility teachings targets as well. So I've got 1 Dispel. Every deck in the format plays Instants, I believe. I guess Elves. Elves maybe is the only one that doesn't play any. And then Mono Black doesn't have any instants that we care about, but they do have some instants. I get to play a Whispers of the Muse, which someone told me about yesterday, and I was like, that's a great idea to get a little more card advantage. You can really put people away teachings for this and end the game. And then otherwise, I mostly just increased the number of spells I had of each type. So before I only had like 2 Disfigure, now I've got the full 4. I was at 3 Innocent Blood, I think, and now I'm at the full 4. I've got 1 more False Summoning, got 2 of those, and then for the Counterspell package, I've got the False Summonings, 2 Prohibits, 4 Counterspells. So there are only 2 cards, well, 2 spells in the whole deck that I had a 4 of already. I had 4 Think Twice and 4 Counterspell. Think Twice is kind of replaceable in the sense that now I get to play some other card advantage spells, but Counterspell is really not replaceable in its flexibility and its power. So I've got 1 Deprive to really fight against Capsize. They go to Capsize your land, you Deprive to pick it up, and it doesn't even matter if they can counter your Deprive. All that matters is that the land is gone, so their spell doesn't work. Yeah, so in order to try to replace Counterspell, I've got some extra Prohibits and False Summonings, but it doesn't feel great. I got this big ol' removal package at 2 mana as well. I've got 3 copies of Chainer's Edict. I still don't have 4. I prefer the instant speed ones, so I've got 3 copies of Devour Flesh. You might ask why I have this instead of Diabolic Edict. I get that question a lot. I don't care about my opponent's life total at all. I will probably kill them with damage, but it won't matter how much life they have. And I do have 2 creatures in the sideboard, so I've got these 2 copies of Grim Angler in the sideboard. And if push comes to shove, I'd rather gain the life by Devour Fleshing my own Grim Angler. Got 2 copies of Doomblade, 3 copies of Echoing Decay, and then an Agony Warp. So one thing that I also like about this deck is I was able to put in more copies of some of these really powerful but situational cards like Echoing Decay. I always had an issue before where even if I was playing 2 of them, I might use them both up, and then I couldn't even tutor out another one later. Especially against like token decks. You don't necessarily want to have to counter all their tokens, but you also don't want to have to like edict one token and then flash it back for the other one. So having an extra Echoing Decay is great. I do have a 1 of Agony Warp. It's mostly for that It's mostly for the Guardian of the Gateless, or not Guardian of the Gateless, whatever, the guy that has protection from monocolored. You can kill him with Agony Warp, so I've got that as a tutor target. 3 copies of Exclude. This is up from 2 in my normal deck. And then one of the other big benefits of playing this 100 card deck is I get to play 4 copies of Pieces of the Puzzle. This is an incredibly powerful card advantage spell. So I've got multiple spells with flashback in the Think Twice and the Teachings. Plus, getting 2 spells off of 3 mana is really strong. And, you know, so it's just so much better than Divination most of the time. Got a couple interesting tutor targets here. I've got Capsize. This is how I normally win the game. I capsize all my opponent's permanents, and then I Evankar's Justice on my turn, capsize them back on their turn. Got a Complete Disregard. This is for Young Wolf if I really need it. I can go exile it, or, you know, if you're playing against Tron, you might want to exile their Muldrifter so they can't get it back from the graveyard or whatever. Just a utility spell. It's not the greatest. I wish there was something better, but this is what we've got. Got a Crypt Incursion, gain a bunch of life. It's great in a lot of matchups. It's our best answer to Reaping the Graves out of blue-black. Search this out. Exile all their creatures. Reaping the Graves does nothing. I got 4 copies of Pristine Talisman. So this is another issue sometimes you have with the other deck, with the smaller version, is that you only have 2 Pristine Talismans in the list. And if one gets killed, like if your opponent just boards in an Ancient Grudge, and suddenly you can't win with Evankar's Justice anymore because you can't gain enough life. So I do have the full 4 now, which is nice. And speaking of 4-ofs, that's nice to have 4 of. Mystical Teachings, in the normal Teachings decks you really only have room for 3, but in this deck I have room for the full 4, of course, so I can chain them together one longer. 4 copies of Evankar's Justice. So this is how I win the game most of the time. Unfortunately, I was hoping to just mill my opponent out by waiting for 60 turns or whatever, or 53 turns, but Evankar's Justice does kill them pretty fast when you've got a Pristine Talisman out. And what's nice about having 4 of them is that I don't have to protect them. I can just use them. I can spew them off for 4 mana. I don't have to buy them back every time. And that was one of the issues you sometimes had with the other version of the deck, is that you only have 2 Evankar's Justice, and if one gets discarded and you have to spend one without buyback in order to kill your opponent's creatures, well, then suddenly you've lost an entire win condition. Finally, I've got a Repeal. It's great against like Germ tokens, and I don't know. It's just a nice card to be able to tutor for, and it gets rid of any problem permanents. Sideboard, we've got 4 copies of Hydroblast, 2 Dispel, 2 Duress, 2 Relics, 2 Shrivels, an Echoing Decay, and 2 Gurmag Anglers. I think they're all pretty self-explanatory, except maybe the Anglers. I bring them in against Burn. I can also bring them in against decks that, like if I run them on time, which I probably will in this deck. I would be a little surprised if nobody timed out in this video set, either me or my opponent. So I have been timing out people a reasonable amount with this deck. And we've been going to like 2 minutes left on the clock in game 2, so that's what the Gurmag Anglers are for. Yeah, I think everything else is pretty self-explanatory in the sideboard, so that's it for this deck. And remember, again, follow me down below, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, whatever you guys want if you want to see more content like this. If you don't, that's okay too. I just want to get more people to see what they like, so some people were asking me to play this deck for a video, so I'm happy to oblige. As far as competitiveness, I've been doing really well with it, but I think it's just basically worse than a regular Teachings deck. It's a little too inconsistent. Like, it's easier for us to draw all of our removal in the wrong matchups and all of our counterspells in the wrong matchups simply because we've got more of them. So, like, mathematically, when, let's say I draw over the average number of removal spells, in a normal deck, I would be less likely to draw more removal spells because like I've already drawn too many and the percentages are less. Well, the thing is, when you've got a bigger deck, the difference in the fact that the difference from the fact that you drew too many in the first place is mitigated by the fact that there's a bigger sample now in order to pull from. So, like, unfortunately, like, say I draw 3 Innocent Bloods, I'm still more likely to draw. I'm more likely to draw more Edict effects than I would be if my deck were built as a 60-card deck. But overall, the percentages are pretty reasonable. Like, they're pretty similar to what I had before. I've got a little bit of extra weight on the removal, which has hurt me a bit in some of the blue matchups, and it's helped me in the Stompy matchups. I'm undefeated against Affinity and Stompy with this deck, which is pretty insane for a blue-black deck. I think it's just because I have these extra removal spells. So I think that's pretty much it. I will see you guys in the games.